Can Christians vote for Donald Trump? There has been a lot of controversy over the last few weeks, and folks, it has come to a boiling point, and Christians are just at each other's throats all over social media, and Christless conservatives are getting mad at Christians, and it looks like the infighting might jeopardize the election, and we have Christian leaders on both sides of the aisle. Yes, Christians can vote for Donald Trump. No, Christians cannot vote for Donald Trump because Donald Trump has been walking back or changing his mind, it appears, on his pro-life stances that he's had for quite a long time. Other people say maybe not so much and that he's been fooling us this whole time. But folks, let's play a couple of the clips that started this whole thing, and I'm going to give you my take and why I think unequivocally, yes, you as a Christian can still vote and should still vote for Donald Trump. So stick with me to the end because I think I'm going to present enough evidence to give you the confidence that you need as a Christian to pull that lever for Donald Trump come November. But first, let's find out why there's so much controversy in the first place, just to refresh your memories in case you've been living under a rock. Because if you've been paying attention, this has been dominating your social media newsfeed. But just in case, let's have a look at what Donald Trump said 4 months ago.
Would you sign a national abortion ban in Congress? Would you sign it?
Did Arizona go too far? Yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And as you know, it's all about states' rights. That'll be straightened out.
So that's what kind of got this ball rolling on this whole thing, where people were starting to be like, whoa, you wouldn't sign a national abortion ban? What's going on here? We thought you were pro-life, Mr. Trump, and now it appears that maybe not. But in actuality, that whole national abortion ban thing, we're going to talk about that. But then on top of that, to kind of compound on Trump saying that months ago, about a week ago, J.D. Vance had this to say.
Can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that.
If such a piece of legislation landed on Donald Trump's desk, would he veto it?
Well, I think it'd be very clear he would not support it. I mean, he said that explicitly. Yeah, I mean, if you're not supporting it as the President of the United States, you fundamentally have to veto it.
So he would veto a federal abortion ban?
I think he would. He said that explicitly that he would. And
I
again,
don't think he's ever said explicitly he would.
No Republican, at least no Republican with any reasonable power, is saying that we should have a complete national abortion ban. I haven't heard that from any of my colleagues. And to be clear, Donald Trump, I think, has staked his position and made it very explicit. He wants this to be a state decision. States are going to make this determination themselves.
So there you have it, folks. What was funny about that clip, J.D. Vance says, I think he would, meaning maybe he doesn't even know. But then forgetting this reporter that Donald Trump explicitly did say that, yes, he would veto it. Because I just played you the clip. If a national abortion ban landed on your desk, would you sign it? He said no. And then this reporter's claiming that he wouldn't sign it. So anyway, so that's what's got. And then on top of that, Donald Trump mentioned some crackpot thing about having the government pay for IVF treatment or something like that. I hope that he is just he's just saying things that he it doesn't really feel like he's actually thought the whole IVF thing out, as far as this very socialist policy of forcing insurance companies to pay for it, or paying for it via tax dollars. It's a very socialist policy. I'm hoping that was just something that he said without really thinking about it. I don't know, but we're going to stick to the abortion thing for right now, regardless of how you feel about IVF. I know there's some disagreement over that as well, but we can all agree as Christians, as true Christians, that abortion is unacceptable on any level, any number of weeks It should absolutely be banned, and we would want Donald Trump, or we would want our elected leaders to sign that. If we had it the way we wanted it, if it did land on the president's desks, he would sign it. That's what we want. We want a president who would sign a national abortion ban. We're not going to get that, but we need to understand, folks. First of all, a national abortion ban is never going to land on President Trump's desk. So those of you who are taking these clips and arguing about it, you're arguing imaginary scenarios. I said this on X. This is planted by the left to divide us, and it's working, by the way. It's absolutely working to divide us because we're arguing over imaginary scenarios. That scenario is never going to happen. We are not at a place in American history where any members or where the majority members of Congress are ever going to pass that on to the Senate, let alone the Senate pass that on to the president. That's a pipe dream. Unfortunately, it's what we need to be aiming for, but it's not going to happen. It's never going to land on President Trump's desk. So it doesn't matter whether if he vetoes it or not. It doesn't matter. It's just never going to happen. So I urge Christians to at least take that into consideration as we move forward here towards November. Don't get caught up in imaginary scenarios. It's never going to land on President Trump's desk. So it doesn't matter if he vetoes it or not. But let's take a look at what Trump did in his first term in office. How pro-life was Donald Trump during his first term? Because he did have, obviously, some major accomplishments for pro-life. So let's take a look at point number 1. This story from PNCI, President Trump takes global pro-life action. This was in 2017. President Donald Trump, in one of his very first executive orders, reissued and expanded the Mexico City policy, which most of you never heard of, which prevents foreign non-governmental organizations that perform or promote abortion from receiving funds from the population account of the U.S. Agency for International Development unless they pledge to stop performing or promoting abortion as a method of family planning, regardless of the funding source. Boom. That was a pretty big deal when he did that, and I bet a lot of you Christians out there didn't know he did that. I didn't know he did that until I looked it up. When I was looking up President Trump's pro-life accomplishments, I was like, whoa, some of these things even surprised me, so I know that some of these will probably surprise you as well. So that's one thing he did. The second thing I found that he did, let's take a look. Title 10. President Trump revokes funds from Title 10, which is the country's only nationally federally funded family planning program. First created during the Nixon administration, the program long provided no and low-cost contraception, counseling, and dispensation to those who would otherwise be unable to afford access to it. In 2019, Trump implemented a new rule that barred any provider in the Title 10 network from so much as mentioning abortion care to patients. Boom. He stopped funding for Title 10 to anyone who was talking about abortion. This caused Planned Parenthood to leave the Title 10 network. And of course, as soon as Biden got into office, he reversed that rule. And of course, Planned Parenthood is now back into the Title 10 network, and they are receiving our tax dollars for abortion counseling in the Title 10 network. So Trump had ended that for us. So that's two things he did for the pro-life movement. The third thing he did, let's take a look at that. He signed the Geneva Consensus with a bunch of other nations. The Geneva Consensus is a coalition of states who oppose the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which are enshrined in national law. In particular, the Geneva Consensus members disagree with the UN's stance on abortion. Geneva Consensus members claim their goal is to achieve better health for women, the preservation of human life, and the strengthening of family as the foundational unit of society. Boom, that's the third thing he did. 32 other countries signed that declaration, by the way. I imagine, I didn't look at the update on that. I imagine Biden took our names off of that consensus. But nonetheless, that is three things that Trump has done. Let's take a look at the fourth thing he did for the pro-life movement while he was in office. Donald Trump withdrew our funding of the United Nations Population Fund. The United Nations Population Fund is an agency that promotes family planning, aka abortion, in more than 150 countries. The U.S. being the fourth largest donor. Earlier this year, this was written in 2017, so he did this shortly after getting into office. Earlier this year, President Donald Trump reinstated a ban on U.S. funding of any international organization that provided any kind of abortion service or advice. Of course, the BBC is claiming this is an erroneous claim because this organization claims that they are not funding abortions, but of course they absolutely were and absolutely still do. So that is four things that he did while in office that helped the pro-life movement. And I don't think he never mentioned regretting doing any of these things. I'm sure if given the chance, he would do a lot of these things again. So that's four things that we got that he did for the pro-life movement. Let's take a look at number 5. Folks, in 2019, President Trump had the Department of Health and Human Services release a rule allowing doctors, nurses, and other health workers to opt out of procedures such as abortions and sterilizations which violate their personal or religious beliefs. From Reuters, this rule ensures that healthcare entities and professionals won't be bullied out of the healthcare field because they decline to participate in actions that violate their conscience, including the taking of human life. Folks, that's 5 things I was able to dig up that Trump did for the pro-life movement. I'm sure there's more. That's where my personal research had ended. Shout out to Priests for Life for helping me put that together. Not to mention, folks, I could have put number 6, all the pro-life judges and conservative judges that he appointed to lifetime appointments. Now, some of those were Mrs. Amy Cohen Barrett. She maybe not was the best pick for the Supreme Court, but there's lower Supreme Court judges that he put on there as well. So he put a plethora of conservative judges into lifetime appointments, folks. So I know, and listen, folks, when I'm telling you this, brothers and sisters, what I'm not saying is don't put pressure. I'm not saying don't put pressure on Donald Trump to be more pro-life. You absolutely should reach out to him and let him know your distaste and displeasure for what's happening to the GOP as far as removing the abortion plank from their platform. And guess what? Your pressure did work, because he at first was unable to say whether he was going to vote for the Florida amendment or not that is going to enshrine abortion in their state constitution up until birth. He was wishy-washy about it, but he came out just the other day with a firm he's voting no on it. So he's hearing you. He's hearing you. So, but listen, Christians, you can't. And I don't want to lecture you here, but you have to understand, if you're not going to be involved, your candidates, the candidates that the Republicans put out are the direct result of the people who are involved with the Republican Party. So Christians, if you're not involved enough, if you're not hitting the pavement, if you're not donating to candidates, if you're not if you're not joining the Republican Party and becoming delegates to vote these politicians, to nominate these legislators, folks, you're getting what you're getting because of your lack of involvement in the political process. The more involved you are in the political process, the more likely it is you're going to get candidates that embody Christian values and biblical principles. So that's those are just the facts. Like, if we want staunch pro-life candidates, we have to get more involved so that we can have more pro-life candidates nominated. It is what it is as far as what we have right now. But I understand your frustration. But listen, you cannot abstain from voting. I'm going to beg you to vote for Donald Trump, because we're not the alternative is not. Listen, folks. I was the same way growing up my whole life. Every single election, I would hear nonstop from the mainstream media, "This is the most important election of our lifetime." Every political pundit, "This is the most important election of our lifetime." I was sick of hearing it. I rolled every single time I heard it, because for the most part, they were not the most important elections of our lifetime. I have since changed that because I believe the 2024 election, I didn't believe it in 2020, I didn't believe it in 2016, but I do believe that the 2024 election is probably the most important election of anybody's lifetime who is alive currently. Folks, we are on the verge of socialist totalitarianism. And if you know anything about these countries that have voted themselves into socialism, very rarely, if ever, do you vote your way out. It's violent revolution to get out of it after you just get pummeled with poverty and crime. Look at Venezuela. Look at Venezuela and what happened to them when they went socialist. Look at what happened to Cuba when Fidel Castro took over. Folks, look at communism. Look at Mao and what he did. Look at the Soviet Union. Folks, we are right on the precipice of becoming what is going to destroy this country forever. Folks, this isn't Donald Trump, who might not be the most pro-life candidate that we want, versus someone who's just a little less pro-life than Donald Trump is. We're not splitting hairs here. It's a drastic and obvious difference, because with Donald Trump in office, we can still fight for the lives of babies without worrying about being thrown in prison, without worrying about a federal law. He might veto a federal law banning abortion, but he's not going to sign a federal law enshrining it as the federal law of the land, which Kamala Harris said in her own words that she is going to do. Let's take a look at that clip.
We who believe that every person in our nation who should have the freedom to live safe from the terror of gun violence will finally pass red flag laws, universal background checks, and an assault weapons ban. And we who believe in reproductive freedom will stop Donald Trump's extreme abortion bans, because we trust women to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do. And when Congress passes a law to restore reproductive freedoms, as President of the United States, I will sign it into law.
Folks, straight from the horse's mouth, she will sign a federal abortion law that enshrines it, and these progressives, take everything to extreme, to the moment of birth with no exceptions. That's exactly how the state constitutional laws are worded in the states. I live in Ohio. That's exactly what we did, because we didn't get out and vote, and we did a terrible job. Now, abortion up until birth for any reason is enshrined in our Constitution. That will be the federal law. You heard it straight from her mouth. She is going to sign it. So you need to ask yourself, are more babies going to die under Kamala Harris, or are more babies going to die under Donald Trump? Are less babies going to die under Kamala Harris, or are less babies going to die under Donald Trump? The pick is obvious. The choice is clear. Less babies are going to die under Donald Trump. More babies are going to die under a Kamala Harris presidency. Not only that, there was a lot to unpack in that clip. She's going to take your guns too. And the folks of Aurora, Colorado, well, let's ask them how they feel about strict gun laws, considering everything that's going on there. That's a rabbit hole we won't go down today, folks, but again, so it's going to be harder to end abortion when it's the federal law of the land. That's just facts. So sure, Donald Trump might veto a national abortion ban, but he's not going to sign legislation that makes it the law of the land, folks. The fight for abortion is probably over if it becomes federal law of the land, because we'll never get a Congress. You know how these Republicans in Congress act. We're never going to get a Congress to ever reverse that law. More babies are going to die. That is just the way it is. That is objective fact. More babies will die under Kamala Harris. And with Donald Trump in office, though he's not as pro-life as we want him to be, we still have the ability to fight. Which brings me to my last point. Kamala Harris is going to hire an attorney general that will continue and take to the extreme the persecution of Christians under the FACE Act. Now, let me remind you folks of what's going on under the FACE Act. Let's take a look at a couple news clips here. Folks, this is pro-life activist Joanne Andrews Bell. She's 76 years old and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. They don't care how old you are. If you protest at an abortion clinic, this will be everybody. Let's look at another clip. This is pro-life activist Lauren Handy. She's 30 years old. She was sentenced to 4 years and 9 months in prison for violating the FACE Act. And here we have, folks, Paulette Harlow, another elderly woman with a debilitating medical condition, sentenced to 24 months in jail after being convicted again of the FACE Act. Folks, the list goes on and on. You are not going to be able to do anything to protest abortion clinics without getting thrown in prison. And let me tell you, it's probably really hard to get abortion banned in prison. So, what do we have here? We have a situation in which abortion will be the federal law of the land if Kamala Harris is elected. And a situation where if you even try and protest abortion, you will be thrown in prison. Folks, this is a recipe for never being able to ban abortion in this country, for saving less lives. Folks, the choice is clear, okay? I know that you're upset at Donald Trump backtracking a little bit on his pro-life stance and the GOP, but I am begging you, it is going to be far worse, brothers and sisters, if Kamala Harris is elected. We can still put the work in. We will not be able to put the work in with Kamala Harris as president. With Donald Trump as president, we can still put the work in. And I hope that we work even more vigorously towards the goal of ending abortion should Donald Trump get elected. But you can't withhold your vote, because if you do and she gets elected, it's over. It's a wrap. Folks, we see that God has already been judging this country. If we put ourselves in a situation where we just allow even more babies than what are already being murdered here, if we put ourselves in that situation, I think it's not going to be good. So let's save more babies. Let's put ourselves in a situation where we can save more babies by electing Donald Trump. Now, folks, I understand it would be awesome to have a third-party candidate. I am a huge advocate for third-party candidates. However, that's just not the reality we live in right now. Let's keep fighting for that as well, so we do have more options at the table again. But this requires us as Christians to continue to get involved if we want better candidates in the Republican Party, and if we want better candidates to come from a third party and get those people elevated as well. If that's the reality we want, we have to work toward it. Me and you. I'm not, putting all the onus on you guys. I got to do more work too, more work than I already do. As far as putting that work in to make sure we end abortion in this country and get more Christian voices to potentially be elected into office. But like I said, right now the reality is we got blue and red. And until that changes, that's what we have to work with right now. I'm not saying we stop working towards that goal, but hey, if me as a third-party supporter can pull that trigger, because I know that what's waiting on the other end of the blue team, it's not even, again, we're not splitting hairs. It's unquestionably worse to go blue team this time around. This isn't Bush Gore. This isn't Clinton versus Bob Dole, right? This is different. This 2024 is a bit different. So with that, I hope I was able to convince you to still pull that trigger for Donald Trump come November so we can continue to fight and save more babies. Folks, thank you for tuning in. Please hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You can find me on all social media at Jesus and Liberty. I'm on Rumble, YouTube, and Christians for Liberty. That's the number 4.com. Folks, Jesus and freedom over everything. Till next time, God bless.